Hello, welcome to Coach Bill's Sports Show. I'm Coach Bill. I'll be with you as long as y'all will let me. So a little bit about the show. We can do some college football previews, team by team breakdowns, college football preview for the playoff. We're going to do some fantasy football breakdowns. I'll take y'all through some of my live drafts so you can see what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, who I like, who I don't like, so on and so forth. We'll also do some breakdowns of plays, concepts, as well as routes, different things that can help you on the field and studying players off the field. Everything that helps is what we're going to try to do when it comes to football. So today's episode, let's huddle up because we're going into Alabama. Alabama's season should be fairly simple to preview. They set as probably right now my favorite for the college football playoff and my favorite for the national champion. They start their season fairly easily with Utah State. A little bit of a test with Texas, but who really knows what Texas is going to have this year. They have a lot of momentum moving forward, and they're doing really well on the recruiting trail. One of the Mannings is always helpful. Back-to-back classes with the number one quarterback, definitely helpful. So it'll be really interesting to see. Second week of the season with Texas. Then you have UL Monroe. Is what it is. Everybody's going to talk about Alabama getting cream puffs, but they got to play who they scheduled. Then they get Vanderbilt, who, God love them, they are an SEC team, but they just really haven't had that team yet to really push them into consideration for being able to beat Alabama. Will they have a bad season this year? Who knows? We'll get to them later on down the road. But will they beat Alabama? I don't think so. So then week 5 comes, and that's the first real test for Alabama this season with Arkansas. Arkansas is going to be one of those teams this year that they could go as high as 10, 11 wins, and they could go as low as 6, 7 wins. Arkansas is one of those wild cards. But do I see them beating Alabama? Not necessarily. But it is the start of the hardest stretch for Alabama right here. Is Arkansas, then they go to then they have Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Mississippi State. This is the hardest stretch of the season for Alabama. But Texas A&M, they're looking for that revenge. This team is hungry. It's talented. While some of their wide receivers aren't as tested, I think the addition of Gibbs as a running back from Georgia Tech is a monumental offensive weapon. He could honestly be pushing for a seat at the Heisman table, depending on how they play. So I think they beat Texas A&M. Tennessee last season gave them a little bit of scare in the first half, but ultimately fell to Alabama. I think that's how this kind of goes again this year, with a little bit of a scare. Tennessee's got some firepower. If Hendon Hooker wants to make a case for, hey, I'm a Heisman, this would be a big game for them. Be a big game for Coach Heupel to really say that Tennessee's arrived and they're on the scene. But are they able to pull it off? And I don't think this is the year. I think they might be a year or two away from that actually happening. Being able to really contend with the Georgias, the Alabamas in the league or in the nation in general. I think it's about a year or two away from Tennessee. Not saying they're not going to have a wonderful season. We'll get to them again. We'll get to them as well here coming up. But I think they have a lot of talent at Tennessee. And it wouldn't surprise me if Alabama loses one of this stretch, wherever it's Arkansas, Texas A&M, or Tennessee. I'd be a little surprised if it was Texas A&M, just because they did lose to them last year. Coach Saban does not have a history of losing to people multiple years in a row. With that being said, this is a tough stretch. And then they have Mississippi State at the end of it before their bye. Mississippi State's one of those little sneaky games. You never know what team Mississippi State puts out. They're a wild team. They're a team that could go, from 5 wins anywhere up to like 10 wins even this season. So Mississippi State's a scary team. But luckily for Alabama, week 9 is their bye week. Later bye than typical for Alabama, which is a good thing for them. Tough stretch he just came off of. Able to get some kids healthy, work some other things out for this last little stretch. Week 10 coming off the bye, they have LSU, which LSU has a lot of things to figure out this year. In particular, that quarterback spot. They have 3 guys down there that are really strong contenders. Really, really good players. Brian Kelly's going to get some things done at LSU that hasn't happened in a while, but I don't think he does it in the first year. LSU's one of those teams traditionally that they could pop off and have a 10-win season and nobody really know about it. And then they also could have a 5-win season and it could be the exact same crew. So LSU's a wild card, but Coach Kelly's first year, I don't think it'll happen this year. LSU is going to become a strong team again under Coach Kelly. It's just going to take a couple years for him to get it all together. Week 11, Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin. Offensively, I think it's going to be a wonderful game to watch. My fear with Ole Miss in particular is, can they stop the defensive pressure from Alabama? That's a problem that a lot of teams this year are going to have when you got 2 guys that are potential top 5 defensive ends. Will Anderson, I think he had 21 sacks so far. I mean, he's a monster. No other way to put it. Will Anderson is a monster. So it's going to be a tough one for them, especially late in the season. Ole Miss could have had a couple bumps and bruises around the time that it comes to play them. Plus Ole Miss coming off a bye right there in the middle of a stretch between Texas A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. That's a tough road at the end of the year for Ole Miss. Nonetheless, Alabama's going to win that one. Then they've got Austin Peay, which will be a good chance for us to see some future players for Alabama, as they'll probably end up pulling the starters after halftime, if not before that. It's one of those games where late in the season they're going to try to keep many people healthy as possible, make sure they get the stats they need, and then let them loose against Auburn, the last game of the regular season. Auburn tried to get rid of their coach this offseason, didn't succeed. I think it would have been a bad move in either way for them to get rid of their coach. He seems to have those kids buying in and believing more and more every day, just from stuff I hear and stuff I read. But do they have what it takes to line up with an Alabama? I just don't see it happening. I don't see it this year. It's going to take a while for an Auburn team to really rebuild and restructure and come back together to be able to play Alabama year in and year out. Honestly, it might take Nick Saban retiring for that to happen. But as for this year, I don't see it happening. That puts Alabama pretty well into the SEC championship, coming undefeated throughout the season. I think no surprises here. It's going to be Georgia against them in the SEC championship. We'll go through Georgia on another episode, but I think Alabama sees them in the SEC championship, and I think Alabama wins this one. Just so much firepower. You've got potential number one overall pick at quarterback, Gibbs, who I think is going to be in the Heisman conversation this year. At running back, they've got talent all over the field. You could have one of their defensive ends, in particular Will Anderson, could be in the Heisman conversation himself as a defensive end. That's a lot of talent. That is a lot of talent for one team. And health permitting, I don't like to prognosticate or predict any injuries, so I just build it off of if everybody's healthy. But I think Alabama's going to come back to the SEC championship this year, and they're going to break the doors off of Georgia. Georgia graduated too much. There's just too much late leaving for them to really be able to compete with Alabama this year. So I got Alabama winning the SEC, going to the college football playoffs, and honestly, we'll get into the college football playoffs later on, but it's going to be hard to beat Alabama this year. So overall, is this Nick Saban's best team ever? I don't know. I don't know if it's his best team ever, but talent-wise, it is close. It's very close. I can definitely see when we come to the NFL Draft 2023 that we're talking about 5-6 Alabama players in the first 20 picks of the draft. We could be looking at upwards of 12, 13, 14 players that are drafted from Alabama this year. So it's a strong team. Alabama doesn't rebuild, they just reload. Well, next time up, we're going to dive into some other teams. Thank you for watching. If you like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you on the next episode. Ready, break.